This is the Transcend in Life podcast with your host, J.M. Ryerson, taking you from fear to freedom.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to Transcend in Life. I'm really excited. Just the brief conversation I've had with this gentleman. This guy is incredible. John Davis is an internationally known speaker, comedian, fight director, and action hero. As an international entertainer, John has traveled extensively throughout the world, speaking to audiences of all ages and backgrounds in 28 countries, over 4,000 live performances. Since the tragic events of September 11, 2001, John has dedicated a great amount of time bringing entertainment to the soldiers overseas. On 6 USO tours, John has performed more than 100 shows and has taken his comedy to even the most remote bases in both Iraq and Afghanistan. John, you have been busy, brother. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me here today. I'm really excited to talk to you and your audience.
Well, it's truly our pleasure. And I know the audience is going to get a ton out of this because you have an incredible background. You've done so many amazing things. I guess I'll start with, how did we get here? And I know that could be quite the story, but how did you get into doing the entertaining and really inspiring so many people around the world?
Well, when I was a young man, I had dreams of being all kinds of adventure heroes. My favorite movie of all time back in those days was Errol Flynn's Robin Hood. I was very excited about that swashbuckler kind of thing. And as I grew up and got older, my weight ballooned up and I became a heavy child and a bullied child, and I had an abusive father and all that kind of crap. But those kind of things were the limitations that were set on me in my past. And then when I found my passion, my desire, my drive of doing stunt work and fight directing and martial arts, then what happened was everything changed. And I started getting really excited about this new career. And then I had the most pivotal moment of my life. Would you like me to share that now, or do you want to wait for it?
Brother, don't leave me in suspense. We gotta share it with people.
All right. So at 22 years old, I was helping a friend of mine who was a professional potter, makes beautiful, beautiful pottery. And I was helping him unload 80-pound boxes of clay from his van. And I climbed up in his van, and at that point I was into martial arts and I was strong and I was doing fights and I was like literally fit. And I stepped up in that van and I picked up a box of clay. And as I turned to set that box of clay down, my upper body separated from my lower body and I collapsed on the ground. They picked me up. They hauled me to the hospital. They get me to the hospital. Doctor informs me that I have a condition called spina bifida occulta. And when he said that, I said Gesundheit. And then most people ask me what that is. Spina bifida, you hear about spina bifida a lot, and it's usually the vision of the spine outside of the body and all kinds of. Spina bifida occulta is a little known version of it. And basically what it is right above my pelvis. When vertebrae form, they come around, they create a little donut. And when they create that little donut, the outside of that donut that comes around forms into what looks like two hands praying. Well, on my back, those little donuts came around and formed, but the hands missed. So I have these little dorky little things that are there. And what happened was, I have 3 of them stacked on top of each other. So it's just an unstable back. And that day when I twisted with that extra 80 pounds of weight, my upper body literally twisted off of my lower body, and it pinched off my spine. I was then paralyzed for about 3.5 months, and to get up to go to the bathroom, I had people helping me do all that, which was embarrassing, but needed. I was told I needed to keep moving just to keep my body from shutting down, and it was during that time I found a book called The Tao of Jeet Kune Do by a little-known martial artist named Bruce Lee. right. And, Bruce wrote a book while he was in traction himself. His back had been so damaged that he was told he would never do martial arts again. And the doctor had told me that I would never have a physical career, even though my dream and passion was to be a stuntman and a fight director and do sword fights all over the world. And reading his book and seeing his philosophy of flexibility and staying like water really changed my entire experience. And what happened was I took those philosophies and got myself out of my own bed. I awoken my own inner action here and decided to live heroically.
So I got to ask on the action hero. I love the idea, but I really want to dig in a little bit on what that means to you because you found this, and I'm sure there were lessons in the book, not only just being fluid and like water, but that inspired you to bring something out, and that's what you've continued to do. So what was it? What really got that action hero to come out?
Well, it's interesting. The word action hero it's interesting. The word action means to create motion or start momentum or to do something. The word hero is someone who achieves extraordinary results in service of others, right? So a lot of what really brought my power out was the fact that I could serve others. But only if I put, as they say on the airplane, you put your own mask on first, right? You've got to empower yourself from within. And so as I looked at my future, I wanted to be a stuntman fight director, but I also wanted to teach, and I wanted to, as I got more and more into philosophy and studying how the brain works as well, what happened was, as I really decided that, my job in life really should be not only bringing entertainment and positive reinforcement, but really helping people reach their potential. I mean, that has been my driving force for the rest of my life after that experience. Being an example of an action hero, when you think about the difference between action heroes and superheroes, right? You hear superheroes. The main difference between the two is that a superhero wears his underwear on the outside of his pants and has superpowers, right? Right. An action hero is an ordinary individual who creates an extraordinary result. Right. An ordinary individual who grabs their own power and goes forward. So for me, it really does mean a lot to me. Those words, action hero, mean a lot to me. Superhero, to be a superhero, you have to get irradiated by some sort of goo in some form, and I'm not into goo.
So putting this all together is really interesting because comedian, martial artist, keynote speaker, obviously you're entertaining, but you're also bringing so much value, and not just in entertaining people, but really inspiring. So talk to me about putting that all together and how were you able to put that all on stage, because it's pretty unique. You don't hear that very often.
Well, it's a great question because of the fact that I did a comedy sword fighting show all over the world. And that meant basically, I started doing that first at Renaissance festivals. And for those of you who don't know what Renaissance festivals are, basically what that means is for many, many years, I was wearing tights and living in the woods. But when I decided that I wanted to reach a broader audience, that meant that I had to step on a stage in a different way. I had to become a speaker. I had to go out there and now the best way to reach audiences as a speaker is to speak with corporations and companies. So now my first step was, how do I go into a corporation and say, hey, you want the guy in tights at your event, right? How do you get that to happen, right? I had to go over my own fears. Now, one of the videos, I was so impressed with your YouTube channel and the some of the concepts on there. One of the video that really hit me was talking about the present moment. Now, for me, because of the studies that I've done in brain science and how the brain works, we have multiple levels of consciousness, right? But there's only one moment that we're truly conscious. There's only one moment that we truly live, that we can do anything. My good friend Holly says, you can't go to the store next Thursday right now. And you can't go to the store last Thursday right now. You can only get up and go right now, right? And in your video, you're talking about the past having some of those traumas that you tap into. And sometimes when you tap into positive stuff, it triggers that you're not there now, right? And for me, it's interesting because when I look at the past is just a collection of present moment memories, right? And the future is a place where we set a goal for our next present moment. But everything happens in the present moment. And to make your past subconscious mind positive, that means you have to create successful present moments and let them stack on top of each other behind you, right? And to get to that next level where you're trying to get to that goal, most people struggle with the idea that goal that's way out ahead of them is literally something they have to struggle to get to. And the reality of it is you can't do that, because if you're never going to get to it, it's going to come to you depending on what you do with your present moment. The small present moment successes will stack. And then someday that great success that you've set for yourself will be experienced in your present moment. So it is literally all about staying present.
So I totally love it. And I'm enamored. I'm listening. I so agree with what you're saying. I'm curious, was that through the perspective of being paralyzed at such a young age? Was that, reading Bruce Lee and some of those books? Where did you really grasp this idea? Because so frequently, I think people struggle with this, and it's clearly defined so much of what you've done. I mean, your list of accomplishments is incredible, but those are those present moments that you're just giving everything to. So I guess the direct question is, how did you come to that conclusion?
When I worked with the stuntmen and the people doing fights, and then of course on the front lines of Iraq and Afghanistan with the soldiers, it was very, very interesting, because over the course of time working with them, I discovered that they understood a principle that they didn't necessarily knew they understood it, but they were doing things that was hacking their fight or flight response. Your mind looks at everything that you encounter as a threat or not, and our body has a primal reaction to it. And these guys, when you're standing on top of a 4-story tower, getting ready to jump off, you can be afraid, or you can do what you have to do. Same thing when I talked to the soldiers in the field. I was talking to these guys in Iraq, a Ramadi, and he was telling me that morning he was in a firefight, and I was like, wow. I said, let me ask you a simple question: how can you go into something like that knowing that your life might be ended, knowing that you're going to a situation that might be done? He says, well, the first thing you have to do is compartmentalize your fear. And so I got to really I started studying brain science and how the conscious mind works. And what was really interesting to me was the idea that you can hack that fight or flight response. I came up with, after studying the stuntmen, studying the military guys, I came up with this 5-step sort of thing I call the 5 F's. And it's how to hack the fight or flight response. And the first one is fearlessness. You have to be fearless. And most people have a hard time with fearlessness because of the fact that they don't understand what fear is. Because whenever I ask my audience, what is fear? The room goes silent. And then somebody in the back of the room will go, false evidence appearing real. Right. I don't buy that, because when you look at fear scientifically, fear is an emotional reaction to some future event that may or may not happen, with your focus on the outcome being negative. It's literally negatively focused uncertainty. That's all fear is. It doesn't exist in your present moment. It's rooted in a moment that doesn't exist. And so setting fear aside is easy, because all you really have to do is look at how your body reacts to fear and counter it. And there's a real simple principle to do that. The main principle is to just watch your breath. We all watch those National Geographic shows, and we see that. Did you guys see that one episode with the gazelle? The one with the gazelle, right?
Yeah.
They all have the gazelle, the doomed gazelle, right? And suddenly the predator cat hits the field. The first thing that the gazelle does is gasp for air. Right. And people think that when they're scared and they're having a hard time breathing, that's because they can't get the air in. That's not actually what's physiologically happening with your body. What's happening is your body has conserved as much air as possible so that you can run further and faster. And in Hollywood, and actors, they're trained to, if they forget their line, to stop, take a big breath and exhale and relax their muscles. And what happens is it shuts off the part of the brain that's telling you that you need air, and it's putting you back into your thinking mind, right? So that's the first thing you have to do, is when you get into a stressful situation, and it all rushes back. So fear is the first of the 5 F's.
So I want to hear the rest of the F's. I definitely do, but just a quick side note so I don't forget. This is really interesting, and there's a great book that's come out recently called Breath. By James Nestor is his name. Anyway, the whole idea of the carbon dioxide and how that can literally the absence of fear. So this is scientific. This is literally science that he's talking about, guys. It's really cool. I love what I'm hearing. All right. So what's the rest of the F's, brother? I love this.
Right. So as I was saying earlier, your subconscious mind behind you is your present moment stacked upon each other. Right. So that fear the way, when I talk to the soldiers in the field, I ask them, so how do you, once you do that, once you take that breath, what's the next step? He says, well, for us, it's easy because we have an objective. We have a goal, So the next of the 5 F's is focus. What are you focused on? Right. So, and what's interesting is people in this world tend to focus positively or negatively. And I'm sure most of you guys know negative people. And if you do know a negative person, then you'll notice that they always have something to be negative about. If you don't know a negative person, you might be the negative person. But the idea of this is the reason those people are negative is because they are looking for negative, because in their subconscious mind, they've chosen to consciously look for negative. And so now their subconscious mind is being stacked with these negative experiences behind them. And so their core belief is now negativity, right? So they're going to see negative. Now, the cool part about it is that subconscious mind behind you literally is your partner in success, because that subconscious mind behind you, if it's stacked positively, will give you positive outlook. Most people, when I tell them that their subconscious mind is their success partner, they're like, what? I go, well, think about this. If you've ever decided to buy a car and you chose the kind of car you wanted to buy, didn't you notice that you started seeing that kind of car everywhere, right? That's because your conscious choice latched onto that brand, that car, and your subconscious mind said, okay, that's what we're focusing on. Let's give him or her that image. Let's show him where to go get it, right? Show them where to go get it. So your focus is determinative of what you're going to achieve in life. If you want to focus negatively, you're going to get negative things. You're going to focus positively, you're going to focus positive things. So it's a matter of taking your present moment and staying firmly positive. And so your focus determines outcome.
Yeah. And he's activating the reticular activating system, which is really cool in what he's saying. The whole idea, and when it comes to the brain, I am that geek. I love reading that stuff, neuroplasticity, the subconscious, conscious mind. I just think it's fascinating. So, man, I'm trying to figure out the best question to go with, because quite literally your background is so unique in terms of one of the things you talked about is countering. The martial arts clearly has taught you that, right? There's an action, then there's a way to counter. Mm-hmm. Why martial arts? How did you really get into that? What was the driving force? Because clearly, I think that's taught you a lot of the life skills that you have used today.
Well, anytime that you are going to go into something new, the first thing you do is you educate yourself. And for me, it was literally all about the idea of being a stuntman, a fight director, doing fights. And so fight directors, the best fight directors in the world have martial arts backgrounds. So I started studying martial arts early on. And that was one of the first things I did when I decided to become a fight director, was to start to study martial arts. And if you check out my video on my webpage at corporateactionair.com, promo video, you'll see me doing nunchucks in the video there as well. But it's one of the things that drove me was the idea that not only was it part of who I was, that being a fight director, stuntman, but once I got into martial arts and started studying not only the martial arts aspect of it, but the philosophical and spiritual side of it, I began learning a whole bunch of things that were really fascinating. Now, I was, as far as spirituality, my mother was a Catholic. She had had her master's degree in liturgy. And I was so blessed that she was one of those people who was like, well, you need to find your own path. And so in my life, I studied Buddhism and Hinduism, and I traveled through India and Egypt, and I traveled all over the world studying I stood with my feet in the Sea of Galilee, and I climbed Mount Sinai, I did all the stuff. And the more I studied, the more I kept finding universal truths. And then when I took those universal truths and I put them next to people like Tony Robbins and Zig Ziglar and people who really are peak performance professionals, I discovered the same stuff. It was the same principles, right? And so it was like, wow, this is amazing. It's like, and all of it derived from that inner power. You've got to grab it for yourself, right? And the pathway to your own success is through your own door. And then when you dive into like Buddha says the secret to enlightenment is the eradication of fear. And then Krishna says, you are the culmination of your thought, right? So your thoughts, your mind, your brain is creating in your experience. In the Bible, Jesus says, what you ask in God's name is granted. And then Moses tells you that God's name is I am. Right. So, it's like, okay, God's name is I am. So anytime you say I am, then you're creating something, right? Which is why when I coach somebody, I immediately take certain words out of their vocabulary. I take wanting, needing, hoping, and trying out of the vocabulary because they're inactive present moment words.
Yeah, man, I love that. And the fact that this has been around for thousands upon thousands of years, these ideas, but yet so often I feel like they get lost in maybe it's just because the world's so busy. I don't know. How did you become such a gifted speaker? So because you are a keynote speaker, you went from literally performing in tights, as you say, but now, I mean, guys, he's a college professor, which if you've ever watched, they're great speakers, but you are a very gifted speaker. How did that come about? What did you train for that? Was it sheer, trial by fire? What was kind of your path to becoming such a great speaker?
Well, it's a great question because I was the classic introverted fat kid in high school. I mean, I was the kid who was picked on and I remember in my 11th grade year, I was in class and had been in that class for 3 months. And I was sitting in that class and I was sitting there and the teacher was doing something at the front of the room. And he just turned to the class to find someone to ask a question of, and he spotted me and he got this quizzical look on his face. And he walked over to his seating chart. He says, John Davis, because after 3 months, he had no idea who I was because I was completely an introvert and quiet in that class. And what happened was, and it was my saving grace, really. After I got out of high school, a friend of mine drugged me to a Renaissance festival, but he was like, we're not just going to go, John. We're going to put you in a costume. And they dressed me up in full chainmail armor I had a battle axe and all this stuff. And I got to that place. And, when you're an introverted kid like that and you're overweight and people pick on you and you go someplace and you suddenly are the center of attention. I got there and I'm a 6'1". At that point, I was 275 in weight. I'm a big guy. And I walked into that place in full armor and the cameras came out and people were like, please let us take our picture with you. And it was like, oh my God. I was like a rock star the first day I did that. And then I never missed that festival the year after. I was there the next year with my own suit of armor. Right. And I did the whole thing. And then I eventually worked into getting that stage show. And as I did the stage show, you do 4,000 stage shows, you're going to get how to work on a stage. And, that show was also very interactive. So I was pulling people from the crowd and doing things on stage with them. So I had a lot of stage time, which is really important for, you have a speaker, you want to make sure that those speakers are experienced and have stage time because the stage time is what builds a speaker. Also, stage time is what builds content. You write your original content. And after you deliver that content 25 times, your content gets so much better and so much more refined. And so for me, that was the whole big deal. So when I shifted into speaking, I literally just brought all of that experience over and started putting it in. That's why when you see me go speak at a corporation, I do bullwhips and nunchucks on stage in my speeches, right? And this 5F thing that I'm talking about, my main speech, the corporate action hero speech that I do for corporations, the finale of that speech is the most profound thing for the person I bring on stage and for the audience. Because what I do is I pick the most timid person in the room because they all know they're timid. I drag them on stage and in 5 minutes time, using the 5 Fs, I alter their belief in self and I also alter their timeline. I take them out of learning a skill and into knowledge of a skill. In under 5 minutes, that person will come on stage, they crack the whip and take targets out of my hand. And it's literally by changing their perspective and literally addressing their fears in time. One of the biggest fears they have when they're on stage and I hold that target is the fear of hitting me. And I say to them, I said, you know what? Look at me. Look at me. They look at me and they get me real intent. And I go, I promise you will not hurt me. You know, sometimes when you're guiding someone through their fears, you got to lie to them. I'm kidding.
There's the comedian side come out.
There you go. It's true though. But if you watch the video, you'll see people on my promo video. You'll see 3 or 4 audience members taking targets out of my hand. Understand that they learned that skill. They learned to crack it and take the targets in under 5 minutes.
That's remarkable. And again, shifting their perspective, their thoughts, and getting them, I guess that would be the focus part. And if you want to reveal the other 3, we'll get to it. Otherwise we'll have people check it out.
No, let's go for it if you want.
Yeah, man, I love it. I mean, I'm fearlessness, focus. I'm all in on this. So I'm ready for them.
All right. So the next one is faith. And I don't mean spiritual faith. I mean confidence in self, right? We all have those moments where we're not confident in ourselves. We have to believe it. My son, right now he's 17 years old and 6'5", and he's going through his hormonal years. But back when he was 6, he taught me the greatest lesson on faith that I've ever had. You see, we have a Nerf crossbow, and you know, for anybody who has a Nerf crossbow out there, you know that they are the most accurate Nerf weapon on earth, right? They will hit their target every time, right? So I created this cool game with my son where one of us would sit on the couch in the living room and we would shoot across the living room floor through the kitchen door and hit the side of the trash can. You know, and it would go ping. And my 6-year-old, he was 6 at the time, my 6-year-old son would giggle, right? Ha ha ha, right? And it was so cool, but he could hit it every time because that Nerf crossbow was so accurate, right? So we had to make it harder. So the other person, whoever wasn't shooting, would take 2 Nerf swords and stand halfway between the kitchen and that couch, flailing those swords back and forth and up and down so that the arrow couldn't get through, right? Now, that was the game, right? So being the dutiful father that I was, my job was to let my 6-year-old win. And so I'd go over there and I'd flail my swords, but I'd leave the whole center open. So it was like he'd see the things flailing, but there was this total open spot, and he would hit it every time. And then it became my turn to shoot, of course. And so I'd get up and I'd shoot the wall and the floor and the ceiling and him and anything but that trash can. About the 4th or 5th time that I did that, he starts laughing really hard. And I go, "What's so funny, Kynan?" He says, "Dad, I know why you miss." I go, "Why? Why do you think I miss?" He says, "Because you don't believe you're going to hit it." Cool. Right? You don't believe you're going to hit it. You have to have that faith, that confidence, and know you can, because that confidence is the present moment success. You know, if you're achieving something and you don't know you're going to hit it, you're not going to achieve it. You know, Henry Ford said, "Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right." You know.
One of my favorite quotes, brother. And it's amazing. Like you said, it's so profound. A 6-year-old literally unlocked the key to the castle at 6 years old. That's incredible.
Yeah. He's my little Yoda.
Man, unbelievable. All right. So I'm in, man. I am all in with faith. So we got fearlessness, focus, faith. Where are we going on for?
The next one's a tough one. The next one's follow through. Follow through. You have to actually get up and do something. You have to actually take an action, you know, and you have to make those moments successful. We talk about those successful present moments. You know, many years ago when I was first doing Renaissance Festival, I had something that most people are very jealous of when I tell them. I had a 1978 Chevy van. Thank you very much. Right. My 1978 Chevy van was rusted out like crazy, and the body was shot. Engine and transmission were perfect. Now, my father also had a 1978 Chevy van, but his engine and transmission were bad. So I gave my dad $500. I brought him into the driveway. I put them side by side, and I called my brother-in-law, because that's what we do when we want something mechanically done in my family. And he gave me a lesson that day. He said, "Get started and call me if you have a problem. Just get started. Just do something." So I said, okay. So I brought those 2 vans. I put a piece of plywood down by each of the vans, and as I took things off the vans, I marked them with a piece of tape and where they came from, and put them in order on the pieces of plywood as to how they came off. Now, to give you a background, before this, mechanically, I had changed spark plugs and tried to do my brakes, and my brother-in-law had to finish them. right? So after all this time, and after swapping everything over, I got the engine swapped over, and that's when I realized that my van was an automatic transmission, and my father's van was a 3-speed on the column. So then I had to change the steering columns. So I got another piece of plywood, did the same thing, made each moment successful, changed the steering column, and then I just making those moments successful and making sure that my future moments were going to be successful by putting those things in place. And then what happened was, I put it all back together. And I was sitting there one day cranking the last bolt tight, and I realized that I had just taken an engine and transmission out of one, an engine and transmission out of the other, swapped the steering columns, and I was so proud of myself. And I climbed up in that van, I stuck that key in the ignition, and nothing happened. Didn't start. So I did the shame walk into my house, and I called my brother-in-law. I said, "Hey, buddy, it didn't start." So he comes over and he climbs in the van and he's looking around and he's looking at the wiring and so all of a sudden the van starts. Boom. I go, "What did you do? You're magic." He says, "No," he says, "John, everything looks right. Everything's in place. Everything's exactly where it's supposed to be. But John, you have the only automatic transmission van in the country that you have to push the clutch pedal in to start." And unfortunately, that's a true story. But it's those present moments that getting up and doing something. I never had the ability before that to do that kind of mechanical work. It was just a matter of knowing I could and then taking the small incremental steps, fearlessly focused with faith, follow through. You mean to jump right onto the last one?
I mean, yeah, man, you got me just cliffhanging right now.
All right.
So, yeah,
We've already kind of talked about the last one. The last one is flexibility. Flexibility. When you're doing those steps and you're taking those follow through actions, something is always going to jump in your way that seems contrary to what you're trying to achieve. Something always happens, right? Now, at that moment, you have a choice. You can stop and get stuck, or you can work with what came to you. Bruce Lee said, "Be like water." Obstacle comes up, you can flow with it, work around it, crash through it. You can do all kinds of things because you're water. So in my mind, when something comes up in your way of what you're trying to achieve, it's there for a couple of reasons. One, you've set a goal, and this has come up because it's something that needs to be addressed, incorporated, or disregarded. It's just something that's has to happen on your way to get to your goal, right? It can't stop you. So as long as you're staying flexible through the process, what's going to happen is you're going to reach your goals, very cleanly and easily, because even though this struggle happened, a lot of times I find that if I'm working towards something and something comes up, incorporating it into what's going on actually makes the outcome better. So you're actually creating something even better because this thing happened. So it's like right now, COVID-19, right? Motivational speaker. I speak for thousands of people when I go on stage in closed rooms, right? Well, what happens when COVID-19 hits, right? The calls stop coming. The events turn virtual, right? So I could have easily said, well, my career's over. I could have easily said that this is just done, right? Instead, what I did was, okay, I'm going to increase my online presence. I'm going to put a video out daily. And my YouTube channel, I put a video out daily, and I nail them, right? I just that's because that's what you do. I upgraded my studio, my green screen back here, right? I did all kinds of cool things to upgrade my experience. I also started building online courses, which are coming out in a couple months. I'm not going to rush them so that I have them now. I'm going to make sure they're right before I put them out. But I'm going to be starting my own podcast in a month or so. I'm actually doing interviews right now and stacking them in queue so that I have a bank to work from. So this COVID-19 was the obstacle that jumped up in my way. And all I did was say, okay, how do I use this to make myself better and move forward?
Well, it's going to be incredible to your podcast. The challenge is going to be, you're such a great storyteller that how are you going to have to ask the question and just try, and that's not easy, because you are literally, I hope people are watching or listening to this and really picking up. He'll say, this is what it is. And then he dives into the story, and it's so perfect the way you do it. It's literally incredible. I want to go back for a moment. I want to take you back to the 22-year-old, I think it was 22 or 21.
Yeah, 22.
22 when you were paralyzed. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Failure is something that we talk a lot about. And not that it was a failure, but I have to imagine a 22-year-old kid, his life has just been turned upside down. What allowed you to just really say, I'm sure I'm going to fail along the way, right? Trying to get better and trying to get back up and all the things, but you had grit and perseverance and something that drove you. I think so many people could get from that because they are dealing with COVID or whatever's happening that's knocking them down. You overcame something so remarkable. Can I get back into that 22-year-old brain and really hear what was going through it?
Absolutely. Well, that 22-year-old brain was crushed, was destroyed, and was desperate. And in all honesty, really contemplated suicide and did a lot of real hard thinking at that time. And one of the things that I learned very profoundly was that I wasn't alone. You know, our network around us, our family, our friends, our work team, you know, the people around us are our strength. We're not in this thing alone. We're all in this thing together, right? And when that happened to me, people came out of the woodwork. I mean, out of the woodwork. That book that I read, the Dao Zi Kundo, was a gift from somebody who thought that I could use it, right? So people were helping me. When I told you when I was paralyzed, I would have to be carried to the bathroom. Somebody was carrying me, right? So even in those moments of despair, even in those moments of darkness, you have a team around you. And what I find interesting when I work with entrepreneurs and people are trying to achieve a lot more, you know, they sometimes get into this mindset of they have to do it all themselves. And that mindset of doing it all yourself is difficult because the reality of it is there's people in this world who are smarter than you, right? And I don't mean overall. I mean, people are deemed smarter because they have more knowledge about certain topics, right? But when I say somebody in this world is smarter than you, if somebody's listening to this, I'm sure that somebody in this world probably thought of you too, because you have the part that they don't understand, right? So you need to lean into the people and the community around you and realize that you're all one. You're all working together, heading towards a very positive direction, if you so choose. Because positive and negative is simply choice. And when I was in that space of wanting to die, because my goal, and I had built my world around being stunts and sword fights and all that stuff, and it was gone. It was snatched from me until I grabbed the power, the inner hero living heroically, and took it back, right? But I never could have taken it back without the people around me.
I love that message. And again, nobody's done anything in this world on their own. It just doesn't exist. I don't care what individual sport. My son and I talk about this all the time. He's in tennis. There's a team of us around him. He's executing, but we're around him. I'm really excited to ask this next question because of the amount of time you've spent with, the members of our military. The word freedom, it's one of my favorite words. And I'm just curious, when I say that word, what does freedom mean to you? I'm just curious for John Davis, what that really means to you.
Freedom to me is the same word as success, right? Freedom to me is being able to express myself fully, right? And as long as you're not harming anybody else, you should be able to express yourself fully. And so to me, when I was in Iraq and Afghanistan, I saw oppressed societies in a big way. And, it's really interesting. You talk about our military, every organization has good people and bad people. There's butt heads in every part of society, right? But for the majority of the military people, they truly believe what they were doing. And when I flew into a base in Afghanistan that's nicknamed Rocket City. It was called Camp Salerno, and it was like the most poorly designed base in the world because it was in the bottom of a valley surrounded by the Hindu Kush Mountains. And we flew in and we landed, and it was really interesting. I'm going to tell you about two people on this base. We flew in on a C-130, and the C-130 is flying as close as it can to the top of the mountains as it possibly can. And the pilot's flying and the co-pilot's standing up looking out the window, and the pilot's saying, "Do you see it? Do you see it? Do you see it?" And he goes, "Oh, there it is." And he points over because they're trying to see it around the mountains because they have to stay close to the mountains. Well, I asked the guy later why they had to stay so close to the mountains. He says, because the mountains are hot and it throws off heat seekers. right. So we come over that mountain and he dips and he gets right on the ground as fast as possible. He hits a dirt runway, comes to the end of the runway. That plane spins around. As it's spinning around, the back gate's opening. Plane's still in motion. And this guy steps on who looks like the classic blonde-haired G.I. Joe. Handsome guy, right? Walks up on there. He says, gentlemen, I need you to leave everything that you brought with you on the plane and get in the truck outside right now. And we get, I'm like, okay, right? So we hop out, get in the thing, and we go inside. And the whole rest of the day, every time we would deal with anything, this guy was right there. This guy, he was the new base commander. He'd been there for, I think, 3 or 4 months. And what you suddenly realized when you saw this guy was he was everywhere. Like at nighttime, we stayed on the base overnight. At nighttime, we went out, and the first person I run into was the base commander, walking from guard duty to guard duty to guard duty to visit everybody that night to make sure they're okay, right? And that drive, that experience was amazing, right? But then, so he was defending our freedom by supporting the people who were there, right? But then he gave us a guide while we were on base. And now this guy was really impressive. He said to me, hey, he was Filipino, and he was getting his American citizenship by serving our military, right? But I started talking to him about it. And I said, so why, how'd that come to be? He said, well, I was actually already getting my citizenship, and I was about to get it. And I realized that if I'm gonna become a citizen of this country, that I need to defend the freedoms that this country provides. And so he joined the military after he became a citizen because he wanted to do that. And he was there in Afghanistan. Now I'm going to tell you, those USO tours, there's a lot that stick to the safest places. Anybody who goes over on a USO tour is in danger. And to give you an example of danger, right? These guys are over there fighting for our freedom because somebody attacked us in 9/11, right? And they're over there, making it right, basically. That's why they originally went. I was in Iraq, and during the early part of the Iraq War, there was a Shia mosque that was attacked by the Sunnis, or it might be, the other way around. The Sunnis attacked the Shia. I forget which one it was, but it was a mosque that was attacked by the other, and it was right next to a U.S. military base. And so it was really tense on that base. We flew into that base to do our show 1 week after that attack. And we came in on 2 Black Hawk helicopters. They had all of our equipment in one. They had us and us. There was 4 of us in that show. 4 of us in the back helicopter. We get out. There's no dining facility on the base because if they have a dining facility, that means people gather, which means there's a big giant target. So there's a truck where you get your food and you scatter. So I go over and get my food from the truck, and we're all looking around, where do you want to eat? And we find a Humvee, and we climb up in the Humvee, and we all eat our lunch in the Humvee. And then we get up, we go over to do our show, we put on our tights, and we put on our costume and all that stuff, because we wanted to bring those guys something completely unique and different. We basically brought them a 2-hour circus show with comedy and all kinds of cool things. And we finished our show and packed up, and the 2 helicopters come back in because they can't stay on the ground because they're targets as well. They come back in. They throw all of our equipment in the front chopper. We climb in the back chopper. The 2 choppers tilt to fly away. The RPG flies under the helicopter I'm sitting in and blows up the Humvee I had lunch in, right? So, it's a dangerous world out there. And right now, with all the stuff that's going on in our own country with the ideologies clashing, it's a dangerous place. And so our freedom has been fought for and won, and is still being fought for and won.
It's powerful, man. It is. Brother, anything I didn't ask you that you're like, man, I got to leave the audience with this. I want to give you that opportunity to kind of end off.
Okay. So the 5 F's, that is the key thing. Now, what I'd like to do for your audience, JM, and I don't think I've told you this, I'm going to give you guys, I'm going to send it to you so you can share it, a free page. There is nothing on that page that sells anything, and it never asks for an email address or anything. But what it is the 5F workbook. So it gives you a chance to go there and go through your own life and look at how that affects with the 5 Fs. Go to corporateactionhero.com. But more than anything else, choose to live heroically. Choose to be the hero of your own life. Choose to find that inner action hero and then take a present moment action, because that's how your life changes. That's how your life goes to that next level. That's how you become an action hero.
I love it, John. You are entertaining. You are your background is so unique. I so appreciate the time, how you bring it to the show and to the world, man. I really do. I had a great time.
Well, thank you. I had a great time as well. Really fun talking to you, Jam.
All right, you guys, definitely. We will link everything in the show notes. The free 5F workbook. I take it, use it, you guys. That was incredible. I literally was writing down notes as I'm trying to do this interview, and I'm going to apply so much of this. So I can't wait to get that out to you guys. And until next week, continue transcending life. We'll talk to you then. Thank you so much for listening. If this content is delivering value to you, please make sure to subscribe, rate, and review us. That helps us build this community, and that is what we are all about. Building this community as big as we can, helping as many people as we can, and deliver as much value as possible. Be sure to head over to transcendentLifePodcast.com for information on my coaching courses, and make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Let's Go Win 365. Let's go win and transcend in life.
This is the Transcend in Life podcast with your host, J.M. Ryerson, taking you from fear to freedom.